Okay. So our goal for today is just to get to know basics in Premiere, starting with talking about some file management, interface, basics of just that whole panels and workspace situation. We'll look at importing assets, get started on a sequence, set some in and out points, look at video and audio and how you can use those differently, go through the tool set, and then we'll export the very simple sequence that we've created. So during our demo, you can just hang out, take notes, make observations, and then we'll have time to practice during our practice and Q&A, and you can use those practice files for that. So I'm going to switch my share over to Premiere. Actually, we're going to start with the little, move that. There we go. All right, so one of the first things I wanted to mention is kind of some file organization. So typically you'll bring in files from your camera. And so one great tip I can give you on file management is as soon as you have those on your camera, dump them onto your desktop or your external hard drive. Get those all off the camera card, because occasionally when you start projects, if you're importing clips, you can accidentally link your project to that camera card as opposed to a local file. So I always recommend that you link things locally, have those locally, and toss out your camera card. Eject that so that you're not accidentally linking to the camera card. Another tip that you can do is kind of organize your files. So just by previewing them, looking at them, you can rename them. I know some people who give them a ranking or a color or something like that to kind of keep them organized. At the very least, it's kind of a good idea to organize things by interview, B-roll, any still shots you have, background noise, B-roll noise, that type of thing, so that you have things really organized and you're not fishing through a whole lot of clips before you get started. I'm going to bring up Premiere. For some reason, Premiere isn't showing. Let's see if this is going to show up. Let's do the desktop there. All right. So I am going to cancel that. Are you viewing Premiere right now? Are you able to see that?
On Premiere?
Yeah, on my screen, are you able to see like the Premiere screen right now?
I see like where your files are.
Okay, that's weird. It's not coming up as a share. Let's try this. Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Okay, that was weird. Usually it comes up as a separate option, but it wasn't. So I'm sharing the entire desktop. So who knows what sort of heinous things we'll have on the screen here today. So this is your kind of home screen for Premiere. Always lists recent projects that you've been working with. There's a really cool feature that they've launched in all of the Adobe Suite on Learning. So if you're new, these are really helpful to kind of get started. And you can also open a Premiere Rush project. So Premiere Rush is the mobile to desktop version of Premiere. It's also a little bit shorter learning curve. So if you've never done any video editing, it's a great thing to start with. Team projects. So team projects allow you to collaborate via cloud with people. I will say, and I haven't tested it recently, the last time my students tested it, it did not go as well as they had hoped. So it wasn't fully collaborative, and they had some version problems. So just be cautious. I would say experiment before you buy into that. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. And so I'm going to name this. We'll just call this session 1. And this is probably, besides kicking out your camera card, one of the most important things you can do, and that's to set your location. By default, it goes into a really hidden Adobe file. So you just always want to make sure that you're choosing carefully which one you're going to go to. And I'm going to go to this session 1 folder. So that's my next recommendation. All of your work, your Premiere project, all of your clips, all of your assets, all of your exports should live in the same folder together. That's going to help your linking and keep things from getting confusing. And just kind of an old habit, I always check that my scratch disks are all going to the same place. And then you hit OK. So now we're in a big blank project. So notice up here, it says session1.pr.proj. That's the Premiere project. And it is living inside our session 1 folder. So just like any other Adobe program, you have different workspaces. In Premiere, you can access those at this top bar. So I'm going to switch to the editing, and you can see how that changes all of my workspace. And if I move things around, I can also go to Window, Workspace, and reset to saved layout. And it's just going to return it to its default position. So to kind of get familiar with where we are, you'll notice that this is currently highlighted in blue. That's how you know where you're working. So this is my project bin. And project bin is a fancy word for folders. So this is where I actually import all of my media. And you can see I could browse to find it. I could look in my libraries for it. Ooh, cats, how on brand. I can look through different effects, markers, things like that here. I usually just come over here to my project and I hit Command I, and I'm going to import all of those files that I referenced earlier. So those are on my desktop and everything's in this clip folder. So I'm going to import all of these all at once just by shifting and then clicking the last one. I could also go through and command click just the ones I wanted. I'm going to import. And since I didn't have anything sorted into subfolders, it's just going to be all of my clips coming in over here. And you can see I've got a nice view of each of them. I can mouse over these clips, and that's called scrubbing the clips, and just get a better idea of the content of each clip. If I wanted to, I could add folders or bins at this point and kind of start organizing this, but for today's project, we're not going to worry so much about that. If I don't like viewing the thumbnails, I can view a list view. I can also do what's called a freeform view. And freeform view allows me to kind of start organizing which clips I might want to work with and kind of drag them around. And I know people who use this as kind of their pre-layout for how they're going to organize clips. We'll just stick with our general icon view. So I've mentioned this blue line lets you know where you are. If you hover in that darker, and it's a little hard to see, but there's this darker black line, I can hover, get that double arrow, and that allows me to expand different sections so I can kind of get the best use of my space. So once I've kind of looked through my clips and maybe I have an idea of where I want to start, I'm going to start with this clip. So I want to edit it a little bit. So it's a 15-second, 22-frame clip. I'm going to double click it, and that's going to jump it up to my source pane. And so my source pane allows me to move the playhead back and forth. And in here, I can do what's called set in and out points. In points are where you start the clip. And to do that, I just hit I on my keyboard. And Let's say right there is where we're going to end it. To end, I hit O on my keyboard. That means when I bring this into my timeline, I just have from here to here. So I'm going to say, hold on for a second. There's one thing that's very different about this clip than other clips, and that's that this clip actually doesn't have any audio. And I can tell that in two different locations. I can tell that right here because that's grayed out. And if I look down here in my project bin, I don't have this little icon in the corner. So one of the things you need to remember when you are starting a very new project is your sequence settings. So that's the size, the frame rate, all of those things for your sequence. I actually need something that has both audio and video so I can establish that. So I'm going to double click this clip. Notice it's just hopped right up here on top of that source pane. But if I go back to this original clip, my in and out points are still there. It's not like I've deleted them. They still exist. So I'm going to use this clip to establish my sequence settings. To do that, either from here or here, I'm just going to select my clip, drag it and drop it. Now my sequence settings have been established, but I still don't want to use this to start my program. So I'm going to click and delete. So my sequence settings have been established, but I don't necessarily need to use that clip. I'm going to go back to that other clip we started with. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to hold in the middle, and I'm going to drag it right down here to my timeline. So in my timeline, I have video clips, which are marked as V, video tracks, and audio tracks, which are marked as A. I can always go and add additional tracks if I want to, but generally speaking, what you want to do with your tracks is have your, or how I organize it. I always have my main interview clips on V1 and A1, and then I'll have my B-roll clips on V2 or A2. So that's a look at just basic in and out. So let's go ahead and keep building the sequence, and then we'll go through our tools here as well. So let's see, let's do, this is a cool clip. So again, just double clicking it, and I can move this, and it looks like, let's get that in frame a little bit. And if we scroll through here, it looks like some weird things happened right there. Do you see that in the film? So I definitely want to avoid that. So I'm going to start my clip right here. That's my in. I on my keyboard, and I'm going to scrub through, and about right there, I'm going to hit O. Now to drag this into my sequence, I'm just going to move my little guitar pick here or my playhead to right after my previous clip. And if you look in the timeline, you can see that white arrow I'm getting. I'm getting that because I'm holding my shift key, and that gets my playhead snug against this clip. So I can drag this clip in. So now we go from here to here, and I'm ready for my next clip. Now this one, you might be able to tell already, is a little bit smaller. So let's see what happens when we bring this one in. And it has sound. So we'll just drag this whole thing in, audio and video. So you can see it doesn't quite fit into the frame. If I double click on it here in my program pane, my playback, I can actually just expand this clip so that it fits. With these first two clips, we trimmed in the timeline. I can also trim right here inside the timeline. So I'm just on my selection tool, and I can just come over here and change that clip size. Now with this audio here, if I wanted to delete it, it's actually linked to this video. I'm not a big fan of unlinking audio because that can get you into dangerous things. I'm more of a fan of just muting an audio track you don't need. So now when I play, I don't hear anything. So let's talk a little bit about our program Playback. You have a couple of numbers to keep in mind. This number over here lets you know where your playhead is. So if you know you need something to happen at exactly 20 seconds, you can navigate down to 20 seconds and that's where that could happen. This number on the right-hand side of your program Playback is your final output. So that's hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Most of the time you're going to be worried about minutes and seconds, so you'll kind of stay in those numbers. So let's look at some more clips. I'm going to find one with audio. Let's see, that basketball one. Okay. So here's my basketball clip. And this time I kind of want to look and I'm going to set some in and out points. I want you to listen. It's not really good noise. It's just kind of a bunch of background noise. And I want to avoid that couple. So in this clip, I'm just going to put an out point. So it's going to go from the beginning to right there. And instead of clicking in the middle, I'm going to grab video and just drag the video in here. Now I've got the same problem with this clip as I did the previous clip. It was shot a little bit smaller, but I can still expand that and get that to fit. Most of the time, you won't have this issue where you have clips of varying sizes. That's because you'll tend to shoot on the same camera or very similar cameras. So now we have learned how to do in and out points. We've dragged clips over to establish our sequence settings. We've dragged either video or audio. So let's get to know our toolbar here. First of all, your default or home tool is always your selection tool. Like I said, that selection tool allows you to move clips. It allows you to trim clips in your timeline. And you can use it to marquee over your clips and move content over. So I might want to do that if I wanted to put in, say, a motion graphic template or something at the beginning. So now I'm going to grab my next tool, which is Track Select Forward. This allows you to select all the tracks from where you select and forward. You can imagine how helpful this is if you have a long 2-minute sequence and you realize that you needed to move a clip in the middle. This allows you to do that. Just hitting Command Z to go back. The next tool are super handy. So this is the Ripple Edit and the Rolling Edit. The Ripple Edit allows you to trim and move clips. So as I trim, notice it's the next clip here is filling that space. So you don't have a gap. The comparison is if I just select these clips and move them, I end up with that gap right there. So that Ripple Edit tool kind of takes care of that, ripples those changes through the timeline. The Rolling Edit trims frames in the next clip. So as I make this one longer, it makes this one shorter. So both of these ripple changes through the timeline. So you can see that just changes this clip, whereas if I go back to my Ripple Edit, it's going to change through the whole timeline. Next is your Rate Stretch tool. The Rate Stretch tool changes your clip speed to fit in a certain area. So it's speeding up those clips to fit in a certain amount of space. So you can see now I've got -7 and +7, that means I've changed the rate of those clips. I don't recommend using that rate stretch a lot because even the most subtle changes in speed can really be read. The exception is if you're doing a how-to video or something like that where it's okay to kind of speed up to the end. You don't need to show every single step. But still, cuts are usually more efficient than a rate stretch. Razor tool. Razor tool cuts along the playhead. So you see I have both my playhead over my audio and my video. And when I click along that playhead, it actually trimmed both video and audio. Next we have our slip and our slide. So the slip tool allows us to change, and you can see the before and after there. It changes timing, but not the length of the clip. The next tool, slide, needs to change 3 or more clips. So as I change this, look what's happening. You can see it's sliding this clip, extending this clip. So a slip is more of timing and not length, whereas the slide tool does change the length. Pen tool lets you edit audio. So I'm going to expand this audio track and we're going to zoom in so we can see this a little bit more. And so if you look at this little white line right here, that's actually my audio levels. And I can use my pen tool to add little points around those audio levels and bring those down. So you can imagine if you were doing an interview and then you have music and you need to kind of edit those together, that's where your pen tool is really going to come in handy for you. Notice you have some shape tools under here. I'm going to show you a different way to use those in a later session when we get to talking about some motion graphics I think you'll like for social media. Next, your hand tool. So your hand tool is going to let you kind of move around in the timeline. You also have these little nodes down here in the bottom that allow you to move through the timeline and expand or contract clips. So something I think most students find helpful is expanding between the video and audio clip, because now you can see visually each of those clips a little bit better. Finally, you have a type tool. And again, I'm going to show you a different trick that I like to use with editing graphics. All right, so we've got a little sequence here that we've built. And now we're going to export this. So first thing to export this, I'm going to select my timeline. And so I have my blue around my timeline. And I'm going to go to File, Export Media. And I'm going to look at my export settings. And so this first one I'm going to teach you is I'm uploading this to YouTube. I'm doing something for the Kansan or KUJH, just a general good YouTube setting. We'll talk about social media settings and some special things probably next week. So I'm going to use H.264 for my format. My preset, I'm going to select and scroll down. And what I'm looking for is YouTube. It's a little scrolling issue here. It's cutting off at the very end. There we go. YouTube 1080p Full HD. My output name, I'm going to select where it is in blue, and I'm going to change the name to Session 1 Export. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going into our session 1 folder. So again, there's my session 1. Here's all the auto saves that Premiere been doing for me. And I'm going to hit save. I always want to make sure I'm exporting audio and video. And then I can just hit export and off it goes. And so for a 23-second video, it's not going to take very long to cycle through. And there we go. If we look at our folder, you can see there's our export. It's an MP4. There's our Premiere project. And there's all our auto saves that were going on in the background as we worked. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording for today.